So Danny, we're in the newly renamed King James, and what was it that gave you confidence that the remains that you've identified here might be part of the medieval building where that man came to his end?
That man indeed. A process of elimination, I suppose. One of the great things about working and training community groups is you can go over things in minutiae really and explain why you think things are the way they are, and then get the response from them. And it was quite clear to us that the masonry, albeit overpainted, was of a very different character to that of the building above, and in all likelihood it was going to predate the building above, which dates effectively from the early part of the 19th century.
Okay, so you say different in character. I mean, just give me a sort of description. Are you looking at sort of thin stone, different stone sizes, different mason finish on it, things like that?
We are, and we recognise two different phases as well of stone rubble masonry.
Right.
Coarse to level in places, but more intriguingly perhaps there is a block doorway there.
All right.
With rather nice squared coins along each edge. Where that leads to?
So that's going in what direction from here?
That would be going in this direction.
In this direction, okay. So out under the street direction.
Given the location, trying to think of the axis of the cellar, in fact, running that way. Right. So it's sort of coming this way.
Okay.
I said a process of elimination. Well, part of that is by using the existing old maps, because we know that there was nothing substantial built on what was effectively open field sites here associated with the Dominican Priory until the late 18th, 19th century.
Right, okay.
So to find substantial masonry below street level here can really only point at one thing.
The general thinking has been, though, that the Priory buildings are further down towards the north and east. So, do you think you're still within a large precinct or something like that?
I think we're probably on the edge of the original curtilage, again based on map evidence, because the street pattern outside the walled city here has remained fairly consistent, even though the earlier maps were not to scale. They show a configuration that is effectively ghosted in the present streetscape.
And now my understanding is that you've got the main Priory complex, as you'd expect a Priory complex, large church, a cloister, but we're also told intriguingly there's this thing called the King's House there.
Yes.
Do we know anything about its relationship to the rest of the...
I think without being able to put these particular bits of masonry into a wider context, it would be difficult. The fact that you are actually down at foundation level there, though, you can see these great big beach cobbles that have been incorporated into the lower courses, does suggest that might be on a similar level to those basements and sewers hapless James found his way into.
No, I mean, this kind of thing's interesting, though, from you're trying to get a sense of the physicality of the whole location, and assuming as well, this has been agricultural it's the town fields and what have you. There would be a fair bit of build-up just through people putting fertilisers into the ground and things of that kind. There's been some other archaeological work, hasn't there? Down slightly further down towards the old Poolers building in this direction.
There is, yes. Now I know that there was masonry uncovered during the 1980s and 1990s, the character of which, from having spoken to the excavators, doesn't seem dissimilar.
Is that on the same axis? Are they getting wall lines that are on the same kind?
That's right. It's quite interesting because they seem to be quite narrow spaces.
Right.
And it might suggest that they might even have been undercrofts.
Okay.
Something like that. Obviously, we have no evidence for that with the wall heads being reduced the way that they are.
Yeah.
But we have to keep an open mind.
Well, the fact though that you've got upstanding walling, it's not. Most of the other medieval buildings in Perth, where they have been excavated, where it's been the stone structures, you're right down to robber trenches, where people have been robbing right down. The Carmelite Priory that Derek Hall excavated just out here. You've got the lowest course of the foundations or the rubble raft. Here you've actually got, how high does that wall stand? I saw it when it was still behind beer kegs.
I suppose realistically, the floor level has been lowered anyway slightly to make provision for a drain.
Right.
It's probably quite an old drain, but it's still in use as a drain today. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah.
But the walls, on average, probably stand about my height.
Right.
That's the easiest thing to say.
But then if you think about that in Perth terms, for medieval masonry, apart from St John's Kirk, that's one of the biggest pieces of medieval structure that we've got visible.
As we said earlier, if that is the case, then, albeit fragmentary, and it is a chance survival.
Yeah.
Certainly, the masonry does not match anything from the early Victorian period or those isolated buildings that we know were on the site before then.
I know it's, and I'm not going to invite you to sort of draw this out and make any kind of firm statements, but if we are looking at a piece of medieval fabric here, that is also hugely exciting because it's our first tangible link to the building in which the king is assassinated, and it really starts to make it real that when you're reading it on a textbook page,
when you take it as read, that's the problem. I think say when we followed this up as an exercise in community archaeology, we thought it would literally be an exercise in the practicalities of dealing and recording effectively what's what an enclosed space, and so to suddenly have it dawn on you that you were looking at something actually potentially rather special. It's one of those things that you don't let out straight away because that people's expectation is that you think I'll go away and think about it. We'll talk about it again in the morning. And I was thinking, I think we've got a result.
Well, it's. I think, given that most of the storylines in Perth are talking about sites, they're talking about long vanished buildings. The fact that you've got a piece of masonry, whether it is exactly of the 15th century or the earlier priory remains, that sort of almost starts to become irrelevant.
Yes.
But just having the tangibility of that, it is hugely exciting. Now, do we have cellars going off? Do you know if there are any other deep cellars in the vicinity?
Well,
here?
It's interesting because we made use of a 1936 architect's plan that very fortuitously came to light the same week that we started our little project by speaking to the staff at the Arcade Bell, who were tremendous. We have these 1936 plans that show the pub being refurbished.
Right.
So what's new in that sense?
Right, yeah.
In rather fine Art Deco style, of course, some of which still survives on the exterior now. But whoever this unnamed architect was very particular in the measurements he took of that open space. And it's curious because he also provides a section through the building.
Right.
You have that cellar and nothing to either side of it, which suggests if there was anything there, it wasn't known. He shows the location of what we know as a block doorway, but he doesn't actually describe it as anything. It is just a space. make of it what you will.